Welcome to episode 192 of thenecronama.com. If you're thinking of starting your own podcast, you should check out the show notes from this episode. You can get up to 2 months of free hosting from Libsyn. You'll have access to critical stats, helping you launch your podcast, grow your audience, and bring your podcast to life. Go check out the show notes for the Libsyn promo code and start podcasting today. Now in their 18th year, Fright Rags has been bringing you the best in horror, apparel, and accessories since 2003, offering a wide range of products for your favorite creature features, slasher flicks, and cult classics. Officially licensed collections include titles like John Carpenter's The Thing, The Evil Dead, Creepshow, Jaws, the Halloween franchise, and so many more. Head on over to fright-rags.com. Make sure to sign up for their SMS and email newsletter to never miss a drop. Listeners get 10% off when they use the code NECRO10, all caps, at checkout. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And this movie made me super jealous because I can't even get people to hang out with me while I'm alive.
I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of the podcast. Don't have anything to say other than I hope my mom never watches this movie because then I'll have to hear about the fire.
I want to hear all about the weird things you did as a kid. So that would be amazing to me.
Well, this was like last week, so...
Oh, okay. All right. So joining us today, Zach Rosenberg is here.
It is great to be here, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
So you want to tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
I would love to. My name is Zach Rosenberg. I am a horror writer who lives in Florida at this point. Please don't hold that against me.
We'll try not to.
I've been doing the writing and submission game for a little bit. My first novella is coming out next month on May 17th. It is a LGBT Jewish horror Western called Hunger's as Old as This Land. And
Sweet.
kind of the subject of, what I'll be talking about here a little ago with these films is on June 24th with Off Limits Press. It is a Jewish pulp detective cosmic horror novella, called The Long Shalom. And
Yeah.
I have some stories that kind of all over the place in various publications and anthologies. Some, for example, Diet Milk, Nightmare Sky, Shakespeare Unleashed, Dark Matter Magazine, and upcoming in the Deadlands, which I'm very proud of.
Damn, dude. You're
Well,
a machine lately. I just constantly see you. You're everywhere. So
I appreciate
hopefully
that.
I'm allowed to say this, but I had the joy of reading The Long Shalom ahead of time. And holy fuck, I loved it so much. And I think I was writing you while I was reading it, and I was like, oh my God, this is great. And I loved it. And yeah.
Thank you so much. I will tell you, we are going to reveal the cover art next week. I am super psyched for that. It is Adrian Medina. Let me give him full credit. He did amazing with this. I just cannot wait to get this book out into the world. It was a story unto itself as to how this happened.
I love his work. He did the cover of my book, Whodunner. So yeah, I'm a huge fan. I'm hoping to get some stuff from him in the future because I just adore everything he does. And if you're looking for a book cover, hit him up because he is so good at you give him hey, I have these thoughts. And then he just comes back and you're like, yeah, that's it. Holy shit. Cool.
Perfectly. I have had just the great fortune to work with some great cover artists. Him, Keelan Patrick Burke did my Western cover. And I said maybe this and that. And I am not the most descriptive of people when it comes to artwork, and he was like, okay, here's this incredible cover with absolutely no fixes to be made, and this is the best thing, the best thing ever. And Adrian pretty much did there was pretty much nothing to fix with Adrian. We were like, okay, we just want this, and boom.
Yeah, Keelan actually did my cover for The Cassowary, and literally all I gave him was the title And I think I said the world's most dangerous bird gets an upgrade, but that might have been him. I'm not even sure where that came from at this point. But that's the max of what I gave him. And the cover was just glorious. So yeah, like you're working with some great cover artists. That's what I'm saying.
Thanks.
So back to your book, the one that I got to read, The Long Shalom. You told me when you were coming on here, you wanted to talk about The Vigil. And then you also said there's this other movie that kind of fits in, like maybe we can throw some stuff in. And it was Cast a Deadly Spell, which I had never heard of. And holy shit, I loved it so much. This is now like, it's a movie I want to like rent a theater and force people to watch this movie. I want to like stock them down and be like, no, you have to watch this. And so I know I said this to you before we went on the air, but I want everyone to understand how weird this is together. Cast a Deadly Spell is such a happy, hilarious, fun movie. And then I immediately watched The Vigil and it just sucked all the joy out of my life. And I was so sad. No, it was a great movie, but it was such a weird double feature together. And spoiler, it'll be my double feature at the end of this. But yeah, I loved watching these two together because it was so crazy how they're so different. And yet, having read your book, I got to see how they both seemingly heavily influenced you.
Yes, very, very much. I was going to say that, kind of the, happy now, like sucked all the joy. That's pretty much the Jewish experience right there.
Yep.
But yeah, no. When I was kind of coming up with a pitch to send, Cast a Deadly Spell was like, you know what? I love the kind of the pulp stuff, the detectives, like kind of the dark noir. Like I grew up with film noir as much as I did horror. I love that stuff. And I love Raymond Chandler's books and Dashiell Hammett, but Raymond Chandler was super anti-Semitic and homophobic and racist. And I was like, you know what? Let's do this as something I can reclaim. Like, let's make this book pro-LGBT, racially diverse. Let's make it, obviously pro-Jewish. The hero is open, like no bones about it. It is a very Jewish story.
Mm-hmm.
And, just like, Cast a Deadly Spell, I love it. It's certainly not Jewish. I wouldn't call it like a religious film at all. It's not really Jewish. I don't think anyone involved is Jewish, but it's definitely kind of a pastiche of the old, pulp stuff. Like, let's add a little Lovecraftian horror. Let's add some monsters. Let's add some, let's just do this really cool world building and these really charming special effects. And it really just blew me away the first time I saw it. Like, Fred Ward, may his memory be a blessing, kills it as the lead. You got guys like David Warner and Clancy Brown and Julianne Moore. It's like an all-star, cast, and they really give their all.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, nobody was phoning in a performance in that film. They were having fun, and it shows, and it's so good. But even just like, and anyone who hasn't seen this, just go see it anyway. But like, their use of zombies is like the greatest thing I've seen in so long. And I adored everything about it. And I really like The Vigil too. We'll get to that. But I had to publicly thank you for having me watch this film, and I want everyone else to do it too.
It is my pleasure. It's one of those things that happened, like a really good director. The director is Martin Campbell. For anyone who doesn't know, he did Mask of Zorro, GoldenEye, Casino Royale.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's like, when you give a guy like that a B movie, he certainly, it's definitely, it wasn't like even one of his earliest films. It was like his probably like fourth or fifth, just on the top of my head. But everyone's really having fun with it. It's just like a movie that clearly they wanted to make, and to just do a fun, there's obviously some horror, there's some creepy stuff, but everyone is just having a good time making this, and that just makes it so much better.
Absolutely. Don, did you watch that too or not?
I got halfway through it because I was trying to watch it before we recorded, and I'm like, damn it, I need to go back and watch it from the beginning because I'm rushing through it because there were a couple of parts where it's like, I need to go back and watch this again because I don't think I saw what I think I saw. And I would say, I don't want anybody to take this as an insult with the movie. I mean, if this happens to be your favorite movie out there and you're listening.
Uh-huh.
I got major Who Framed Roger Rabbit vibes from this movie.
That just makes me love it more. That's one of my favorite movies.
It was the whole, oh, you don't work with tunes. Oh, you don't work with magic. You're the only guy in town who does it. So I'm sitting there like, you could put these two movies as amazing. A double feature.
You know what? 100%. Roger Rabbit meets the Dunwich Horror. Let's go.
Yeah. Which, I mean, Who Framed Roger Rabbit's a horror as well.
I would agree with that.
There's no way to get around it.
Christopher Lloyd gave kids nightmares. Let's not mince words on that.
Right? One of these days I'll laugh myself to death. So, Don, before we went on the air, you were talking a bit about how horror films are often inherently Christianized and Western, and you and Zach were having a great conversation about it. And I would just like you to reenact it like you haven't done this so that our listeners can hear it.
Well, actually, that's not what I said. What I said was, in response to Zach talking about a representation of the culture and identity, I wrote this down and I wanted to include it in a panel in the future, which is, give me religious-based horror that is not Catholic or evangelical, so not non-Western Christian. So give me Jewish horror or Jewish-based horror. Give me Muslim-based horror. Give me Hindu, Shinto, Buddhist. Give me more indigenous stuff, because all the Catholic stuff, as a former Catholic, is all the same and it's boring at this point. And this is not to revisit shitting on zombies and all that other stuff. But at a certain point, because I love zombie films, I love creature features, I love all that stuff. But at a certain point, you get an oversaturation of it and they all seem like they're the same. And even if you are doing a zombie movie that's a little bit different, you're still like trying to emulate what somebody else did in their zombie movie, or you try too hard to break away from it. But if we have this, as far as getting more, I guess, more representation of different cultures, different religious ideologies, the folklore, the legends that come along with it, the mythology, as far as different types of creatures and demons and things like that, I think we'd have a lot better storytelling. And a lot more options that, somebody would look at a film like The Vigil in the same conversation as something like The Exorcist. Yes. Because nothing against Exorcist fans, but I enjoyed this movie a lot more than I did The Exorcist. And I think it's because there's that oversaturation of, hey, here, the Catholic Church is here to save the day. So it wasn't that thing of, the church is taking that central role of being the hero. Here it's somebody's dealing with something. And me as a viewer, I'm trying to figure out, what are the cultural effects or cultural issues that are taking place, which is very well and very tastefully represented, because as someone who has a limited knowledge of Judaism, I fell right into it. I'm like, okay, I understand that. I understand this. I understand. You're making it clear without having to fully teach out everything that this young man is going through, or everybody he's associated with is going through. Yes. Even when it comes to like dealing with Rebbe, you're like, you don't have to be Jewish to understand what Rebbe's trying to do.
Right.
Because if you're in the South, and as you are, Zach, and as I am, you get inundated with people inviting you to their church.
100%.
And it's one of those things like, no, I'm good. No, are you sure you don't want to come? Because it'd be great for you to come and do a testimony. No, I'm good. I don't participate in that anymore. I mean, nothing against it. Yeah. It's just not my path.
And if you're Jewish, there is kind of like, a lot of people put it as a goal to convert Jewish people. There is that's just very much a thing.
Oh yeah.
And it's funny you say that, because Jewish horror has a very interesting history, because there's so much that's found in places like the Talmud, that is, or folklore, or stuff that just became oral folklore over time, that was really just kind of passed down for a long time with all these kinds of creepy folk tales. Like something I found out relatively recently that actually upset me a little. You know that movie by Tim Burton, the Corpse Bride?
Yes.
That was based on a Jewish folk tale.
Really?
Bitch.
Really. And they intentionally removed all the Judaism from it so they could have it appeal to a wider audience. So I found that out. I was like, wait, what? And
Don, this is eating me alive over here.
Eating you alive.
I take every shot I can to insult Tim Burton, but continue.
So, like, really, like, the first kind of like Jewish horror works were these plays where these playwrights would create plays out of their own folklore, like the Dybbuk or the Golem, and some of those got adapted to kind of early films in the silent era and beyond. And the Dybbuk is a very famous movie, or and it's a play, and it kind of persisted, but kind of like underground in a sense. And you didn't see golems very much until like 2018, where there was like an Israeli film company that like redid like the Golem, which is it's a quite a good and creepy movie. Don't get me wrong, but like Dybbuks were gone for a long time, except for like the Coen brothers did this short bit at the beginning of A Serious Man, which is actually like quite terrifying. But kind of like even Jewish writers were kind of embracing kind of the Christian ethos, like Ira Levine, who did Rosemary's Baby. It's all about, it's Satan and Satanism and witches and like stuff that is not traditionally found in Jewish folklore because, like Satan as like the great fallen angel as he is in that movie isn't really a thing. And kind of like a big thing about it, but like Ira Levine's one of his other famous ones, The Boys from Brazil, which is about Dr. Mengele trying to revive a cloned Hitler, is really what Jewish horror was for a very long time. It was all about Nazis and the Holocaust.
Right.
The Twilight Zone tackled that. Rod Serling was like proudly Jewish. And kind of like one thing that's always kind of dissatisfied me is kind of the even movies where it doesn't play a huge role, there's an automatic assumption that Christianity is the one true religion. Like how many times do you see a vampire repelled by a cross?
Right.
Or like the power of Christ compels you with just even random exorcist stuff. There was actually there's one really good book by F. Paul Wilson called The Keep, which kind of plays with that, where the heroine, kind of the real hero of the book, is a Jewish woman named Magda, and she's awesome and badass, and like they kind of play on that. Like the villain is not actually a vampire, but he's playing on those tropes. And it F. Paul Wilson does like this whole cosmic horror thing, but he never invalidates like her Judaism, and that was something I found very impressive. He never like made it so like, oh, Christianity is the way, and when you see like once again the vampires repelled by the cross, what does that say to a Jewish viewer?
Right.
Yeah.
And the
I remember
was. Oh, sorry. Oh, go.
Oh, I was gonna say, I remember in Bordello of Blood, that was used as kind of a punchline.
Yes.
Where I can't remember the actress's name, but the lead vampire, the queen vampire, she was leaning in and saw like a little bit of glistening of something, or a glimmer of something. And Dennis Miller, his shirt is open a little bit, and she looks and she sees the Star of David, and she kind of has this sigh of relief of like, oh, thank goodness. And I'm sitting there like, okay, that's a good play off of all that, at least the history of it. But it's done in a way where it's kind of like we're making fun of the way in which vampire lore has been. And here we are, as opposed to somebody's holding up a cross and we're being defiant and like, this is the way that we're going to get rid of the vampires. It's kind of like, oh, shit, a cross. Oh, it was just a Star of David. You can't, but also that whole thing of like, you can't hurt me. You can't do anything to me. Which again, I mean, coming from a marginalized community, when you see something like that, or at least it becomes a punchline, but it's also this dig at the way in which people have kind of written off that religion as being something that can save someone. Right. You then start to question this idea of, is my life worth something? Is my existence valuable? Because when you see it represented that way, it questions like, well, shit, I could be a victim. There's nothing that can save me, unless you're Benny from The Mummy. When he starts speaking Hebrew and holds up the Star of David, the mum, I can't remember his name now. Imhotep. He looks at him. He's like, "Oh, you speak the language of the slaves. You can work." He gets saved because of his basic knowledge of Judaism and his basic understanding of Hebrew.
Yeah, I just want to take a moment really fast and just interject that, so much of Stoker's Dracula, which is what became the template, was based on fear of Jewish people coming into the area and how it would infest your area and stuff. So it actually makes a shit ton of sense that they would use a crucifix to drive this out, and
right.
But I always thought it was funny at the same time because I'm like, you literally hold up a Jewish guy. So what? if you believe Jesus Christ was who they say is and that he was a Jewish person and all this stuff, then that's a really weird thing to try to drive Jewish people out with.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, Stoker's. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's actually funny you mentioned that too, because even if you don't take Dracula as a Jewish bit, there's still this random bit in Dracula when there's just a Jewish character who's this ugly, hairy little guy,
right?
Who the heroes just bribe to help them, and it's there's actually a musical called Dance of the Vampires. It's in German, Tanz der Vampir, which actually inverts it beautifully. Where one guy is bitten by a vampire, gets turned, and someone tries to hold him off with a cross. He's like, "That ain't working on me. I'm a Jewish vampire."
That's great. I don't know. I just always thought it was so weird. What a strange choice.
I want a Jewish vampire movie now.
There is one, actually. It is called Blood Relative. It's on Shudder.
Okay.
It's quite good. It's like a nomadic vampire learns he has a daughter and who's a teenager who seeks him out. The opening bit, he gets into this fight with an anti-Semite when he's asking the guy just to let him in the store. He's like, "Come on, man, be a mensch." And he goes, "What do you mean, mensch?" He's like, "Yeah, it's Yiddish. Yid-ish." It is a funny. It's definitely worth a watch. There's been actually 3 good Jewish horror movies in the past year alone, which is completely unprecedented. For a while they brought it back. I mentioned before, the recording cut, but I gotta just bash these movies one more time. The Unborn and the Vigil or not the Vigil. Sorry, the Possession are let's take these. Let's just make let's Catholic. Jew them up a little and completely mangle the folklore.
Oh my god!
The Possession.
I haven't seen either, but I'm glad.
I had a chance to talk with Grady Hendrix about one of them at a con with the Unborn. He said one of the funniest things I will never forget about the Unborn. He was like, there was another dimension they were trying for it, but of the roads they had to take, they chose the shitty one. And the Possession, once again, I have to mention this. Everyone thinks there's a fucking dybbuks. It's come on, it's not a thing in Jewish folklore. Dybbuks possess people. There's this really good one that also came out called Attachment the same year. It's also on Shudder, where there's a bit where the Jewish guy is trying to explain to one of the heroines of what a dybbuk is, and she's like, "Oh, it's a ghost." He goes, "No, it's not a ghost. It's a dybbuk." And she's like, so it's like a ghost. He goes, "No, it's different." How? It's a dybbuk. Come on. Basically some guy just made up a dybbuk box on eBay, and now everyone thinks oh, this is a dybbuk thing.
That's so crazy. Man, the guy influenced movies and didn't even know he was doing it.
Yep.
So to get into this film a little bit,
yes.
I want to say the thing that struck me the hardest with this was its representation of trauma in a different way than I'm used to. With this, you get trauma of the individual, how it affects families, then how it affects neighborhoods and communities, and it just keeps growing. And I love how one person's trauma, you kind of see how it affects different things. And when you have something as ingrained as Nazi Germany and everything handed down with that, and it's so weird to me. You were talking about like these great folk stories in the past, and it's weird to me how that's, well, it's not weird to me. That's the wrong word. It pisses me off, but it's not weird how things get erased and we just focus on one piece. We don't look at all of history anymore. We look at this one thing, and then some of us act like that thing didn't happen. And there's so much, there has to be so much more history and folklore to pull from and all these great stories. And I'm a complete outsider on this, and I'm pissed off at how everything's reduced to one fucking thing. But that trauma and how that affects literally everybody and any way you're connected to it. I thought this film was interesting in how a different trauma that is kind of displayed in this film as just as equal as the Nazi trauma, because each person is individually traumatized. And so it's almost kind of equal in just how it affects people. And I thought that was utterly fascinating, just this entire representation of trauma.
Yes. I really appreciate how the Vigil represented it. Not only the notion of individual trauma and hate crimes, but the way that trauma is passed down through a community. It's not just through a family, through intergenerational situations. And it does it in such a way that, you know that trauma does not go away, but you can fight it and live with it. And one thing I think is very important in the way this movie presents it is, Yakov is someone who has left the Orthodox community because of what happened with his brother and the hate crime, and how the film really handles his mental issues and his trauma with serious empathy. And one thing I think that it drives in that I think is really important is the power of the community, but also the power of identity and how much comfort he takes in that. His Jewishness is not just something that is impotent and weak. It is something that gives him strength in the darkest moment. And even, towards the end, basically Yakov is not ready to, maybe go back to the Orthodox community, but that doesn't make him any less Jewish.
Right.
And I think that's the one thing in the Jewish, there is so much, different sects and conflicts between them. There is so much of that between Orthodox and Hasidic and Reform and, Reform and conservative and, Haredi. But the Vigil really kind of takes the position that, Yakov is Jewish, and that's what gives him his strength at the end, and that's what makes him powerful.
I love that. And I loved even just, for lack of a better term, his support group that he's a part of. I loved how that is a community that is sectioned off of even more communities, but like just the way they're there for each other and support each other. And oh man, I loved everything about that. And just the way it was represented, like you hit it on the head. It was pure empathy. And I think that's a big thing missing in not all horror by any means, but specifically like religious horror. I feel like we lose a lot of the empathy because so much becomes individualized and not community based. And so, this just blew me away with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's also very important. Like the film takes place really in just one house overnight, mostly. It feels very claustrophobic, and the mazik, the spirit, is just absolutely terrifying. Really, I was really on the edge of my seat when I first saw this film, where like I was saying, it is so metaphorical and so well constructed that really everything in it is a metaphor for some kind of trauma. And it takes the kind of like the nasty stereotype of the anxious Jew and does something so interesting with it. It really makes it so, it takes time to make you care about Yakov and care about his community and his place in it. But also, you want to see him succeed, and he has people around him who care.
Yeah.
There's so much depth to it.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I just like, it was really unlike a movie I had ever seen, where it was like, this movie is by Jews for Jews. It was basically like, I remember when Keith Thomas was saying, Jewish horror it's not really a thing as far as I'm looking at. I want to do something with that.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just really it just really blew me away. And the acting is just rock solid. It is just elevated by the nature of cultural and personal trauma mixing together.
Yeah, that's yes. I don't even know what else to say, because that just sums it up completely.
Well,
but yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, in the beginning of the film, I wrote down, as I often do, wrote down some of the quotes, and I wrote this quote and I didn't realize how much it was going to change, or how much the meaning was going to change throughout the film. And that was when Yakov says, "I just want to be normal." And I wrote this down partially because I know how much you hate that word.
I do.
But I didn't understand at that moment, because I was like, okay, well, what is he looking for? Because that quote should stand out. At least for me, it should stand out. I should start looking for what this means. And I see it from the beginning. My perspective on "I just want to be normal" was, okay, he's rejecting his religion. He wants to fit in with everybody else. At least what the concept of normal is. He even when Rebbe shows up and the group leader is like, "Hey, do I need to call the police?" And I'm thinking like, oh, he's being harassed. He's being followed around, by people he used to associate with, because he doesn't want that sense of normalcy. He's seeking something else. Then, the idea of going to the house and seeing how distraught and how anxious he is. Well, he gets distraught later, but how anxious he is, and then eventually gets distraught by what he's seeing, what he's reliving. And even talking to his doctor before you realize that it's not his doctor, about taking the Ativan and trying to deal and trying to process that grief and that trauma. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, damn, how can you know what normal is when you don't know how can you become what normal is if you don't know what your idea of normal is? So it's like you're looking for something this entire time, but you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
To actually get to that point, and even if you get to that point, you may not know if you're at that point of what quote unquote normal is, and all the ways in which he's trying to cope with what he views as being abnormal.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing way to put it. It was really, it's kind of like the idea of that when you say "I want to be normal," what you mean is, I just know that the way I am right now is not right, and I don't want to be that way. And I don't want to be that way anymore. I want to get. It's like you have an ideal in your head that maybe you can't even reach, but it just indicates like, I want to reach this point and everything will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a very difficult thing to deal with. And I think a lot of people deal with that too, especially especially someone like Yakov, who is left a Hasidic community, and now he's struggling with his identity, and he's struggling with his pain and his trauma over his brother's death. And kind of, I think the film really succeeds. It's obviously it's a very heavy film. I would not call it a fun horror movie. I would call it a great one, but not a fun one. But it succeeds where he can say, "I'm not broken. I am," he, at the end of it, I think it kind of like really comes down to him coming to grips with the idea of like, normalcy is something. It's less normalcy, and it's more slight repairs and healing, where he's able to step out into the street and text the girl he has a crush on for a coffee date. And like, that's a very powerful thing. But at the, kind of the end of it is the hint that the mazzik is still out there. It's not something that can be destroyed. It's going to latch on to someone else.
Right.
And that's so symbolic of trauma in itself.
Yeah. And I think I really appreciate how the film does deal with the Holocaust without making it a center of things. There's not a Nazi ghost. There's not like Nazis in it. Like, they're like Mr. Litvak was, he was in Buchenwald and he was tormented by what happened there. And that is important to discuss that intergenerational community trauma, but it does it without subsuming Yakov's arc, and it does it without subsuming everything about him. And I think that is really, really a skillful and subtle piece of writing that most people aren't able to grasp the way that Keith Thomas puts it in that film. And I was very it really took me a couple of viewings before I was able to kind of understand and appreciate all that. Like the idea of, you have only this night to stop the mazzik or it will be with you forever. It's like saying, this is your night to face up to everything. This is your time to fight back and to, once again, not destroy the trauma, not to banish it forever, but to come to grips with it and start that road to heal.
Yeah, the lack of, I guess the better way for me to say this is, if I didn't know this film before I went in, because I read spoilers for everything because I'm an asshole, but if I didn't, I would have fully expected him to start having visions of the concentration camps and basically reliving. I don't remember the man's name. I'm sorry. Reliving his life. Like, that's what I would expect, because that's what I've always been served with Jewish stories.
Yeah. And thankfully the film, doesn't do that. It makes it about, Yakov in the present. And I think that's something it really deserves a lot of credit for. And there's, I really do think this film has opened the doorway. Like, we don't have very many, but like I said, I don't think without the Vigil, there would be as much interest in Jewish horror now. I don't think my two big inspirations were the Vigil, and Josh Mallerman gave a fantastic interview with Becky Spratford about how, like, we don't see as much Jewish horror. He had a great line where he said, we have one Dybbuk story for every 99 Holocaust stories. He's like, the Holocaust is very important, but there should be more. And I was like, yeah, there should be more. And, the Vigil was one of those more. And like I said, it definitely opened that door. Now that we have films like Attachment and The Offering and Lullaby, and hey, look, I love Lullaby because, hey, we can even get mediocre Jewish horror films now. That's awesome. I mean, like, no shade to any of the filmmakers involved. I just thought that was not one of the stronger entries.
I love that, though. I had a question because I read a little bit of an interview with, is it Keith Thomas? Is that the writer?
Yes.
Okay. So I read an interview with him, and he was talking about the way the house is decorated, and basically how, if I recall this correctly, so forgive me if I fuck this up, but it was basically a Jewish woman had owned the house that they filmed this in, and so they kept a lot of her stuff because it was decorated the way a Jewish home would be decorated for that age group. And right. I didn't know if you had any personal insight on like stuff we might not have caught because we wouldn't understand it, or just like the significance of anything that's in the house.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. There was certainly a lot of trappings there, like the mezuzahs on the door, the books. A mezuzah is kind of like a little scroll contained in a small case that is used as a blessing upon a home. it's a hard question because it's so normal to me to see, like, I've been in a lot of Jewish homes, both Reform and Rabbi homes, that that Litvak was obviously an observant Jew, that there is a great deal there that and obviously they're not throwing up just Stars of David or menorahs everywhere.
Yeah,
but just like the organization of the place, just the books around, just some of the religious trappings it really shows an attempt to like recreate how like a Hasidic man in a Brooklyn community would live there.
Okay, because I guess maybe I wasn't even asking this correctly because I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Oh, no,
but it was more, I didn't really notice anything out of place. So I was just wondering if there was anything that like really added context or just really, added to the story, but it's all good. Not
much. I think one thing that like really stuck out to me that they got right, that very few people actually do, is the covering of the body. Jews are not supposed to be looking upon the dead, basically. So like, Litvak's body just being covered all the time with a shomer there is, I think, very is like one of those little touches that made it feel like more alive to me. Like, Jews don't, like, even at funerals, there's no open casket, there's no wake. When my grandfather passed away in December, just to give an example, when he passed at the funeral, it's just the coffin, you're inside, you're put in the ground. The Jews are not meant to be looking upon the body as a form of respect.
Okay. Yeah, see, and that's kind of the stuff I was curious about, because when I read the interview, he made such a big deal about the stuff in the house, and I was like, oh man, am I missing like a ton of stuff? But then I miss like something super obvious like this with the covering of the body, which wouldn't have even occurred to me. And you instantly taught me something new and made me appreciate this movie for its authenticity even more. So
it really is. Like, I'm just trying to like bring up like just everything from the coffee table, the carpet. It really like, the way they put the mezuzahs, where they place them. There's just like there really is so much. It's hard for me to really talk about because so much of it is so normal to me. It's so much of it is just so normal and obvious for me. But like, look, the mezuzahs are placed, near the doors. It's just it's like the little things like that. Like the mezuzah, it's, for a blessing, it's arranged so someone walking into the room would see it or be able to touch it. It's something that is, very important to many Jewish homes. And like the coffee, like the way the carpet is arranged, the design, that's also very very Hasidic in a sense. And just like some of the imagery around the home, the way the books are there, it just really gives an indication that Keith Thomas really cared about getting it right. I think, if like memory serves, he actually went to like rabbinical school at one point. I think I remember reading that in an interview.
Oh wow!
So yeah, he really knew what he was doing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Don?
Well, I was going to say that the covering of the body, I obviously you notice it, but it was one of those things where I was questioning, like, well, is this a tradition? Is this because I wrote down, as far as cultural, what are cultural rituals to respect the dead? And you answered that question as far as the idea of not looking upon the body, because all the funerals that I have been to, which I have at least two more I know I'm going to end up going to. I mean, this is not me planning anything. It's just, both my parents are alive. So it's one of those things of like, they're in relatively good health, but I know that day is coming. And I just, my mother made it clear as far as what her wishes were. And it's, I don't want a funeral. I don't want anybody looking at my body. I don't want to be on view. I just want to be, have ceremony and bury me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that goes in contrast to basically how she was raised, which was you're going to have a wake, you're going to have people go to the funeral home and sit with the body, and you're going to have your viewing. That's what it's called, the viewing.
Right.
You're going to have the viewing. I was trying to remember what it was, and it's the most obvious thing. So you'll have your viewing, you'll have your wake, you'll have, the body will be put on display in the church. People will walk by, and then the family, they have to sit in the first couple of rows because no one else is allowed to sit up that close. And of course, I'm remembering my grandfather's funeral from a few years ago. And I just thought it was, again, I'd been to a good number of funerals, but I just thought, God, this is so weird. And I mean, and not in a disparaging way, but I'm like, just so strange. If you were an outside observer, you would be questioning, is everybody in here to look at a dead body?
Yeah.
And even the idea that some people will say like, oh, I'm not going to take my kids to the funeral because it's too early for them to see something like that. I'm thinking like, well, when is the appropriate time? Like, yeah, because even with Catholic funerals, because she was Protestant, she was Baptist, or is Baptist. Jesus, I've already killed her off. But even going to Catholic funeral, it was the same thing. It was like, it was just very odd to me, even at a young age, that this was kind of our practice. And then seeing other communities, it was, you got to be buried before the next sundown, or there were things that you couldn't do to the body, as far as when you were burying them or embalming. I'm sorry, not embalming, burying them or cremating them. Or the idea that there were certain ways the body had to be presented to the public, or not presented. So I guess that's a long way of me getting to this question, which is, what are some of your favorite cultural rituals with respect to death? Not necessarily funerals or waiting for the body, but just the whole thing as far as, I guess, rituals that within any culture, for that matter. I mean, it could be your own, it could be beyond that, but as far as,
you can't just blindside us with that. I need weeks of research here.
Oh God.
I can definitely talk about, like one of the most important ones, and that is called, sitting Shiva. And that's really where the movie, that's where the movie, kind of shot like that. It shines because a Shiva is very important to it. It's after someone passes away, the family is meant to stay at home. They let people come over, and because there's a lot in Jewish culture that revolves around food, it is let the family stays there. They grieve, they mourn, and the community just kind of comes together. They bring over food. They say they're sorry. And one thing a lot of people also miss is Jews typically do not put flowers on graves. It is actually they put stones there because stones are permanent. And there, it's like a lot of the little things that people don't consider. But yeah, the sitting Shiva is something very important to me. I've had to do it a few times. And I actually have a story coming out in the Deadlands called Sitting Shiva, which is a ghost story. Not as dark as the Vigil, but it's one I'm very proud of. And Shiva is something incredibly important. That's pretty much universal across the Jewish experience. One ritual, not necessarily related to death, but it was something I really did enjoy from the film, is the scene where he wraps tefillin.
Okay.
Towards the end, when he wraps his arm in the strap with the box on his hand, that is something. That is something for anyone who doesn't know. Tefillin are also called phylacteries. They are boxes that contain scripture from usually, and there's scriptural commandments in Deuteronomy and Xmas that say, take religious law and bind them as a sign upon your arm. It can cause some discomfort, but it's very much saying that it brings protection. It means the word is it's with you. It is such an example of him embracing that ritual to draw faith from it and embracing his culture and heritage and religion, that it's just such an incredible scene without much attention drawn between that. Like he's basically saying that God is with me, and that's why he may be afraid of the mazzik, but he's still going to face it.
I loved how that scene is so reminiscent of like every battle movie where you have the montage where they armor up and get ready to battle, and it was just such a cool take on that same sort of thing.
Yes.
And it means the same thing, which is just even better. But that scene was dramatic for me as an outsider. It was like, holy shit, this is the moment, you know? And so I can't even imagine like understanding everything that goes with it. It probably means even more, you know?
Yeah, and honestly, it's like such a great answer to the scenes of like, pick up the Bible and the cross and the power of Christ compels you. It's like, no, this is the straight up Jewish answer to that, and that is awesome.
Like they could have played Eye of the Tiger during it, and I would have bought it completely.
Jesus,
I couldn't resist. I've been good this whole time.
Love it.
But yeah, like it is such a cool scene. I love that scene.
it could be the Eye of the mazzik.
Good Lord, now you've gone too far.
Even better is mazzik, I believe, means destroyer.
Nice.
All right, James, while you're still thinking of yours, I'll give mine because this is one that stays in it lives rent free in my head. It's this tradition in the Philippines. It's like one group of people, one community. It's called
Indonesia. Isn't it the Indonesian one?
No, the Philippines.
Okay,
it's called the Kutkot. Basically, what these families do is they go to graves, they dig up their relatives, take them out of the caskets, out of the coffins, and then change their clothing for them, and then prop them up, take pictures. They have like celebrations and whatever. And I just think it's beautiful, and you never want to say anything somebody does it culturally is grotesque, but it's tragically beautiful because you're seeing people that are digging up, their dead loved ones to pay respect to them, to give them new clothes. And then, of course, I think they get reburied the next day, but they're sitting there and partying with them and hanging out, and celebrating and recognizing their lives and their humanity. So I think it's really cool. I know what you're talking about because it's done in Indonesia as well. I just knew of it first. I first knew of it when with the Philippines.
Yeah, the Indonesian one is similar, except they have, and again, forgive me if I'm fucking this up because this is just coming straight out of my head and I'm not looking it up. But I believe there's like a whole parade, and like that might even be the wrong word for it, but similar to a parade, like they literally walk the dead through the city, and
wow.
I don't know, like that's so interesting to me. To answer your question, I don't fully know the meaning behind it. Maybe you guys do, but like my family is all Czech and Roma, and a big thing is putting coins in with the body when it's buried. And I don't know, it's not even something my family ever really like drilled into me or anything, but like I saw, I want to say it was like one of my grandmother's friends or something. It's an older gentleman, I don't know. And he did it at my grandmother's funeral. And I just remember my dad telling me, and I was like 10 at the time, so I don't remember all the details. But it's just one of those things that's always stuck with me that I thought was just a cool thing. And it kind of ties into the stones you were talking about, because I always thought, wow, coins, that'll hold up. Like that'll still be there versus roses or some shit that's dead 2 days later.
Yeah, no, I find it fascinating.
Meanwhile, I'm like, I'm kind of like a dog. One day I want to just like disappear into the forest. Leave me the fuck alone. So I'll be like, it's my time. I got to go, peeps. Bye. That's how I speak in my daily life.
Were you a good boy, James? Were you a good boy?
I'm not getting one of those memes. You were okay, I guess.
With so many, when it comes to Jewish funerals, there's a real thing about how the body is supposed to just return to the earth. Like some even put in coffins without like even bottoms, so they can like decompose even faster.
Oh wow!
It really varies, like where you see it, but yeah, it's very much about like the body is meant to return. We don't really go into like what happened. Like there is some belief in an afterlife. It's not like the same as Christian. There's like different views on it. There's debate. There's debate over everything in Judaism. But yeah, it's very unclear as to what happens next. And like you're mostly supposed to concern yourself with the here and now.
Right.
I mean, that makes way more sense to me personally. So anyway,
yeah. My wife wants to be turned into a tree.
I think that's
like
she
wants
cool
one of those burial pods, which again, it's a weird thing for us to have that discussion, but she made sure to tell me so that her wishes would be honored, because her family is still very Catholic. And when she told her mother, she's like, "No, that's not. You don't want that. We're gonna." And she said, "No, I want to be put in one of those burial pods to turn into a tree, because it's a huge waste. Like, why have my body in this box, of whatever material it is and whatever chemicals that are put into my body to preserve me, so that people can look at me at an event or whatever. Why not just return? We came from the earth. Why don't you just return me to the earth?" So those are her wishes. I basically told her, I'm like, just if something bad happens to me, just catapult my body into Congress. So
look, I don't want anything bad to happen to you, but I would love to see that. Like, as sad as I would be that you're gone, I'd be like,
look, I'd either be looking down or looking up, and it'd be like, look, that's hilarious. Like, why would you do that? Like, they had it coming.
It's the way he wanted to go.
All right, let's pull it back to the film. Zach, what else do you got?
All right. Well, yeah, honestly, like the Vigil was, like I said, it was just formative. It was just formative and incredible for me. I'm sad it took till 2019 till we got it. It was just like one of the best pieces of Jewish horror that I've ever seen. And really just needs to be more well known by people. I really wish Keith Thomas is going to do more coming up. I would love to see more Jewish horror from him. And one thing I really freaking love is the use of the mazziks. I don't think there's very much folklore on them. There's a lot of stuff where I think a lot of it was lost because so much of it was oral folklore. Mm-hmm. So little of it is like written down. So like mazzik, the traditional lore of it is it's like a demon that can attach itself to someone and can cause minor irritations or even worse. It really depends on the story you're telling, but the name means destroyer, and like that is like damagers or those who cause harm. It's like demons and evil spirits don't really feature very prominently in Judaism, especially as Christians or pagans conceive of them as entities in their own right. Instead, they're kind of like forces of the natural order, so they're more like forces of nature than anything. But the Vigil, I watched that a few times when I was just having the idea of like, let's take a noir, let's make it Jewish, let's watch this, get those anxieties, get those past mistakes and sins, and that was something that really just inspired me the entire time. And that might be a good segue to talk about Cast a Deadly Spell now.
Sure. Before we do that, Don, do you have any other notes on the Vigil that you want to cover?
I mean, the main thing I wanted to, I guess, include and make sure I didn't overlook was a reference to what Zach had said earlier about the use of the Holocaust and the non-exploitation of the Holocaust, I guess is the best way to say it. Yes. As far as not using that as this is the thing that's driving him, or even this is the thing that drove Litvak. because for the longest time, when I was teaching my film as history course, I had to remind my students that there, up until Schindler's List, there was no film that really respectfully discussed the Holocaust or analyzed the Holocaust, and showed them interviews with Steven Spielberg and even and a couple of articles that were coming out that around the time the film was in production, complaining and saying, like, why is this guy who's done all these Hollywood blockbusters now going to make a movie about the Holocaust? Like, I don't think this is going to be tasteful. I don't think it's going to be a good. Now, of course, they all ended up eating crow after that. When they saw the film, they're like, holy shit, you got into some stuff. And what he did by introducing this, he introduced a whole nother generation to the Shoah and the effects of it, and the fact that you still have people that are living that survived this. You have people that can share their stories. And of course, they digitized a lot of interviews, a lot of speeches from people. And he pointed out, he said, I dealt with World War II, or I dealt with the Holocaust by having Nazis in some of my films as the villains. Rightfully so, because they're fucking villains. They're the worst. Right. And said that I waited until the time was right because no one felt that they would be being respectful by talking about it or representing it. And I'm going to paraphrase it, but he basically said something to the extent of, there's never going to be the right time, because we're either going to do it while it's still fresh in everybody's memory, and there's really no need to do this big expensive movie about it when we're still when we have people that 2 years ago were in a camp. And this is your uncle that you can talk to, or this is somebody else in your community that you can talk to about it. And then you have this moment where it might be 30 years later, 40 years later, and someone say, well, the wounds are still fresh.
Right.
And then you eventually get to this point where you miss the opportunity to actually be honest, truthful, give a great representation of what people went through, the horrors of it, and not do it in a way of, hey, I'm going to make this big budget movie that people are going to sit down for 3 hours and eat popcorn and really feel good about themselves when they leave. The movie appropriately, from an outside observer, appropriately teaches about events surrounding the Holocaust to demonstrate how horrific it was. So you didn't need in this film to exploit it like other films have exploited the Holocaust for whatever movie they were trying to do, whether it was an action film or it happened to be, I don't know, a drama or whatever. It's the background is this. Or the Jerry Lewis movie that will never see the light of day.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, where he plays a clown in was it Auschwitz? Was it called The Clown of Auschwitz or something?
I think it's The Day the Clown Cried.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What as far as the camp, was it supposed to be Auschwitz or what?
Actually, I do not remember that.
Yeah, but for those of you who don't know, basically it's a movie about Jerry Lewis as a clown during at a concentration camp, but he's there to kind of entertain the kids and make them feel better. But it was something that when it was made, it was immediately shut down. Like, we can't release this to people because it's not going to be sensitive to this. And I love when films do this. Films like The Vigil do this, which is, we're going to give you an indication of what this person went through, but that is not their full identity. We're going to give you an understanding of what they experienced, so you get a taste. But then we're also going to draw in this idea of the violence that was witnessed and experienced in the Holocaust. It hasn't gone anywhere. So for somebody like Yakov, who knows of the Holocaust from family members, I'm assuming from family members and community members, because that would be, something that was still going to be discussed. The anti-Semitism that brought that on is still in existence. And then, of course, his younger brother falls victim to this, because it's something that's ever present. And you understand that you have people that are going to be targets of this. And now he's having to deal with being targeted by something else that actually wants to consume him in the same way that anti-Semitism would. So now it's going to consume him physically, spiritually, psychologically. And it's something you can't escape, just in the same way you can't escape the way that people are going to have these feelings about you or have these stereotypes and generalizations about who you are. And I was just by coincidence, I was reading one of the essays from James Baldwin the other day called Harlem. And he breaks down what anti-Semitism is, but he's breaking it down for how Black people process anti-Semitism in Harlem. And it's not that he said, what you guys need to understand is you don't hate Jewish people. You don't distrust Jewish people. What you hate and what you distrust is the system, the economic exploitation that both of you have fallen victim to. Right. You hate the discrimination that both of you have fallen victim to. But because there's a Jewish businessman, there's a Jewish landlord, there's a Jewish attorney that's in your neighborhood, that's the one white face you see, and then you compound their Jewishness on top of that, and you say things like, "Man, I don't want to deal with Jews. I don't want to do this. I don't want to work for them." But you work for them, you get along with them, you see them as people, but you have to deal with the way the world has put the two of you together, and in some cases pitted the two of you against each other and victimized both of you to where now you're putting all your energy and doing the same thing that other anti-Semites are doing to them. And basically what his essay comes to is like, learn that this person is not your enemy. Right. The enemy are the people who built this situation. Right. And these folks are going to be victims just like you, or victimized in the same way as you are. So do not turn your back on them, because, you know, when you're looking at the 1930s, 40s, and 50s throughout the civil rights movement, there were a lot of Jewish brothers out there helping. There are a lot of Jewish folks that were participating. And, you know, his letter, his essay itself aged very well to where he wrote it in the late 40s, early 50s. That essay you could write right now and talk about the same aspect in any of these ethnic neighborhoods where you have a mixture of Black, Latina, and Jewish folks, and make that same argument of like, he's not the problem. Right. You need to focus on the people that have pointed the finger at them and said, these are the guys you shouldn't trust. The ones you shouldn't trust are the ones that are pointing their fingers at other marginalized folks.
100% there. And one thing, you know, that's also something I want to, you know, kind of close out on the vigil on is, I think it's also important that, you know, in so many instances, like, you know, that majority uses Jewish suffering as props to tell it, uses Jewish suffering as props for Gentile saviors, or just, you know, quick and easy victims. And that's endemic. That's happening even today. Like, Nazi romances are still a thing. The Holocaust is just a background event, or it's all about, you know, the Gentiles. And that's one reason I love the vigil. It's about the Jewish people. It's about the Jews from their own POV. There is, you know, Schindler's List is a great movie, don't get me wrong. But have you ever seen The Gray Zone?
I have not.
It is not an easy.
I'm going to have to check it out then.
It is a very good film. It is not an easy watch. It is set inside Auschwitz from the perspective of the Jewish Sonderkommando, and the inmates. And it does, you know, they are ruthless in trying to survive. They are staging a resistance. It is a brutal film that holds nothing back. Harvey Keitel plays the commandant, who is this utterly fascinating portrayal of evil, where he is basically saying, it's implied he's disturbed by what he's seeing and the massacres, but he basically says, it's my orders. I'll get in trouble if I don't follow the orders, and I don't really care about you people enough to risk to put my neck out for that.
Is this is the one, because I just looked it up. This is the one with David Arquette, because I remember a scene from it where the people are going into the showers, or he's got to talk them into going into the showers, and he's making this argument like, oh, you know, just everything will be fine. You need to go in there. And the I may be remembering it wrong because it's been forever since I saw this bit from it, where this one woman is kind of questioning him, like, you know, and he has to kind of reassure her, like, no, everything's fine. You know, you got to take your clothes off. You got to take your jewelry off, because you're all getting a shower, but he knows what it actually is.
Right. Right.
And by the way, I did need to say this first. Fuck Kanye for anybody. Fuck Kanye West.
I will drink to that.
Because anybody who, I haven't been able to say that in a while, because I guess he finally stopped attracting cameras and microphones after all that stupid shit he was saying and doing.
Oh my
Which
God.
isn't a long line of stupid shit he was saying.
Oh, don't. You don't need to tell me. Dude, I was driving past Kanye was right signs for a bit.
Wow.
Wow. Oh, okay.
Can I just interject super fast? I just also want to throw in "fuck the boy in the striped pajamas" because you
guys are saying all the right things right now. It's great.
Look, I was trying not to mention that movie because when I said exploiting, I was like,
I legitimately wasn't going to mention it, and then the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, this film is just, and the book is just constantly used to educate people, and it's such a fucked up story.
Look, I had
into a fight with the Auschwitz Memorial, for God's sake. Like, what else do you say to that? Look, I will just say the worst one I think I've ever heard of is it's this Christian romance one called For Such a Time, where it's like a retelling of the story of Esther, where she has the heroine fall in love with the commandant of a death camp.
Get the fuck out.
This is a thing.
I literally didn't know that Nazi romances were a thing until you said it. Like, this is one time I wish that we did video, because my face must have been fucking amazing when you said that.
I'm still trying to process it that, one, somebody wrote that. Excuse me, let me go back. Somebody thought that was a good idea. Then they wrote it. Then it got made. And then you got all the steps in between of other people saying, yeah, this is a good idea. We should make this.
I have literally read bits from it at the library where it's like, I'm just like, it's like, oh yeah, this guy has actually secret compassion. I'm like, he's the fucking commandant of Tenerife.
Jesus.
So this is gonna be a fun. This is gonna be a fun transition to like the fun, happy pulp one.
Oh man. All right. Well, let's do it. Let's kick over to Cast a Deadly Spell. I wasn't sure how much we were going to talk about it. That's why I hit some stuff at the beginning. But yeah, man, tell me about this film and what you love and what you want to talk about.
Oh my God. It is just like, it is a fictional 1940s where, as opposed to the real 1940s, where magic exists, supernatural creatures are just a fact of life. Our hero is the hard-boiled detective, Howard Philip Lovecraft, played delightfully by Fred Ward. And he is contracted by a rich man named Amos Hackshaw, who is played exquisitely by David Warner, to basically track down the stolen Necronomicon.
Mm-hmm.
Never heard of it.
Which is stolen from his by apparently his old chauffeur. So Lovecraft has to navigate things like his old flame, mobsters who are running a zombie racket.
I love them so much.
To prevent the end of the world from the villains summoning the old ones. It is just crazy special effects, fun writing, a total sense of tongue right in the cheek. It's what gave me the idea of like, I got to do a detective story. I got to do something like that. Like the Long Shalom, the first line in the book is, it all starts with the wrong Shalom.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I was like, I want to take this, make it Jewish, but capture that just capture that sort of magic this has.
As one of the only people that can say this outside of you right now, like I think you nailed the shit out of it. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So you mentioned the zombies, and I just want to say the zombies are like the highlight of this movie for me.
The zombies are fucking great.
You have the big badass bodyguard zombie, and he's fantastic. But the construction crew is like the greatest thing in the world to me. I could watch this scene just I wasn't even paying attention to what they were talking about. I was just watching the zombie construction crew because they were so awesome.
It's so good. It's so, and like I said, the special effects aren't amazing, but they're just so that there's like a real heart to like the practical effects there, and the and just and even the villains. Like I freaking love Clancy Brown in this movie. Like he gets the sharp suit, the little mustache. He looks like the quintessential mobster, and he's just having a ball.
Oh yeah. He's so great. He's great in everything. Like I just adore this man. But so I was looking this up, and this was like it came out 3 years before Shawshank came out. And so Clancy's just young. And and then like he just like leans into this role so hard. Like I don't know. I just love everything he did with it. It was just great. But overall, I think the thing that I really dug about this was just you kind of already hit it. That supernatural stuff exists, but like they don't go out of their way to like set it up. They don't kill the joke by telling you it's coming. Like the fucking gremlins in the little engine.
Yeah,
is the funniest shit because he's
great.
just like, I know what's wrong, and he goes and throws it open, and there they are, and it's so great. It's not, and that's what's so good about it to me is we took all this, different folklore and different supernatural creatures and stuff, threw them in, and just accepted that they're there, and it's that level of commitment to accepting all this that I think makes this work so well.
It plays it so straight, and that is just the reason I absolutely love the movie. It's like it wouldn't work if it tried to be too silly or too serious. It just kind of straddles this line with like the world. It is everything the movie Bright failed to be.
Yeah, because that movie took itself way too seriously. I enjoyed it, but it was one of those things of like, there's something missed. Like there was this moment where it's like you could have leaned in a little bit more to the comedy.
Oh yeah,
it was like Lord of the Rings but cops.
And also like the really lazy world building. Like it's like the Alamo happened here. Was the Alamo like Helm's Deep? Were they under siege by orcs? Is like that actually sounds really really racist when you say it out loud.
Oh man.
But yeah, no, Can't Deadly Spell is like and okay, I will freely admit I think David Warner is one of the single greatest actors to ever play a villain. Like that man owned every role he was ever in. I got to meet him once. He was just a lovely he was just the loveliest gentleman who loved talking about his stuff. And yeah, it was just like it was great talking to him about like this movie, Waxworks, like some of the great ones he's been in. He's just having an absolute ball with it. Like I remember Christopher Lee once said, you take every role, like no matter how ridiculous, and you try to find something in it. And I think he embodied that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just every time I'm watching it, like, I'm not sure it's going to be a spoiler if I say, oh, David Warner is actually the bad guy. So
we don't care about spoilers anyway.
Okay.
So,
well, spoiler alert for everyone who I just spoiled it for. So.
That's just question. Like, when was he ever the good guy? Like, that's the thing you have to really look for in his credits.
I'm sure there was. I know there were some, but yeah, but like, there's just such a great bit I love where like the villains just have such a great duo where he's talking about how he's going to destroy the world, and like Clancy Brown, Borden, he's like, oh, so you're just going to rule over like a small sliver of dead planet? Yeah, I'm totally good with that. Like how about them apples? Just freaking man. Yeah, it's just a fantastic movie. just something so underrated from a director with like a surprisingly very solid filmography from around that era. Like, I know it's easy to get overshadowed by something like Mask of Zorro and Goldeneye, but like, I'm like, yeah, Cast and Spell. I think they even made it for like just HBO.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I remember that era of when HBO had like their own movie, like maybe once or twice a month, they had like, an HBO production. And I don't see how I missed this one at the time, because I was fully in on HBO. If you told me like, oh, we're going to be doing this, some wacky space horror comedy fantasy, like, you don't need to give me the preview. I'm going to watch it because it was coming on Friday or Saturday. Well, no, Saturday night was the new films. It was going to be on like a Thursday or a Friday night. I'm catching it. I saw some of the worst, in a good way. I saw some of the worst movies of all time thanks to HBO. Because these were not going to be critically acclaimed movies. These were going to be things that you watched, you liked them or you didn't like them, and then you got together with other people that liked those movies as well. The same thing with the early days of HBO TV series before it became a thing of here's some really big budget productions we're gonna do. Oh my gosh, I'm thinking about all those shows HBO used to have that as a young hormone-driven young man, I was not supposed to be watching.
Oh my God!
Yeah, like Dream On.
Totally. I mean, let's be fair. Like, totally same boat. Like, HBO was, where the cutting edge TV. Like, I just really admire HBO's Max, their current commitment to going. We are well known for risky and famous and cutting edge and quality television. We need to get away from that.
Right.
Oh man, yeah, no, that is it's just like, HBO. They would do like I would. There was actually a sequel to this with Dennis Hopper as a detective. It is nowhere near as good, unfortunately. It's one of those times where you kind of watch it and just get some fun out of it. But Cast and Deadly Spell is something that sticks very much on its own. I would say it is something that stands alone very well. I wouldn't call it like a very scary movie. It's got some good horror scenes, but like moreover, it goes with like the action, comedy, like the action horror comedy through it. And that was something that just really inspired me the whole way through. Like, honestly, when I sent Off Limits Press the pitch, I had the idea in my head. I was not expecting to get the call back. I really was not. Like, it hit me at like 10:30 at night when I had a migraine. I was like, oh my God, I'm not sleeping for like the next 2 hours now. I'm so excited. So I decide, so I'm like, all right, I got to start writing this. And then like, I am a total pantser when it comes to writing. I have an idea. I will sit down, try to make it work. And then it's like, oh my, then I just started like putting in like little flashes of humor in it. I was like, actually, this is pretty fun. Let's throw some more Yiddish in there. Let's throw some more jokes. And I had like so much Yiddish that my publisher actually recommended me to do a glossary for Gentiles at the end of the book. So, as James has no doubt seen, which my aunt called the Yindex. So,
oh, that's amazing.
I know. I was like, I credit my aunt 100% for that. So I had so much fun just throwing that out. I was like, you know what? The hero is a Jewish guy living in Brooklyn in like, the 1930s. He's going to use some fucking Yiddish. A lot.
Absolutely.
Like a lot. So, basically my dedication was even to, thinking of guys like, Philip Marlowe and Sam Spade and Nicky and Mike Hammer and obviously, Howard Lovecraft, not the real Howard Lovecraft, who was just a replica human being, but it was like, to every Jewish kid who ever wanted to see themselves as the hard-boiled hero. And I will say, like, one place the film does kind of stumble is like making like the world is now saved because of like, you know, an underage hookup. Like that's the part that's the skeevy part of the movie that does not age well at all.
Yeah, it's very much like Monster Squad. Like you need the virgin, and she hooks up with a married dude when she's 16. And I love how the married dude the whole time is just like, "Oh, you wouldn't tell anyone, would you, Lovecraft? You wouldn't tell anybody about this, right?"
And
like,
Lovecraft is just like, "They'll build a statue of you. You saved the world." I'm like, Howard, maybe that's not the attitude we want to take towards this. I mean, like, you know,
even when he gets in the car, he tells his what's her name, Connie. He's like, she goes, "What did I miss?" And he's like, you missed the screw that saved the world." Like, it's so fucked up. And yet it's really funny at the same time.
All you had to do was just age her up 4 years, guys. Just 4 years. It wouldn't be that bad. Yeah.
She could have still been a virgin. She could have still been hunting unicorns. I do love when she's hunting unicorns and she accidentally shoots Grimaldi. And that just cracks me up, because then later this is the guy that she's hooking up with, you know, but like she doesn't even like seem to think it's that strange that he's out there. She's just like, "Oh, hey, what's your sign, baby?" You know? So great.
I like, honestly, I could talk forever about just the villains of this movie. They're just so much fun with how much like just how freaking like unapologetically evil they are. It's like I just made a post on Twitter the other day where it's like, "Oh, hey, a good post on Twitter. That's you know that's a change." Where I was like, you know, I'm watching The Mandalorian. I'm just like, I just love like Moff Gideon, like Giancarlo Esposito as Moff Gideon. Mm-hmm. We just need more bad guys who are willing to like do evil monologues to captive babies. Like that is just like it's like yeah. Like the villain who is you know, he has good intentions and a sad backstory, and he thinks he's doing the right thing. Blah 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 blah. No, give me the guy who's like bragging about his world domination plans to like the little baby who cannot even answer back. Like that is a level of villainy that like Borden and Hackshaw aspire to, and it's beautiful.
I don't know, man. This just sounds like a weekend at Mar-a-Lago to me.
Oh my god.
Listen up, baby. You know, like.
Hey,
Sorry.
Hey, baby, what's an indictment? Sorry, I couldn't resist. Yeah, that was actually something I kind of followed that a little in my, you know, like one of the ways I pitched Long Shalom, which, you know, unfortunately, Casting of the Spell isn't great on it, but I wanted to say, like, let's take the people who would be the outcasts and the stereotypes in common noir, and let's give them the power. Let's make them the heroes. Like the heroes are a pansexual Jewish man, a bisexual Japanese Jewish woman, a former black soldier, and a trans woman who I tried to give them as much agency and make them as badass as I could. Mm-hmm. Try not to write this without stereotypes. Try just to write them as heroic and nuanced and layered. There's a line that my publisher just loved from Lenore, which is I'm getting real tired of like people not getting what me shooting them means. He's like this is like the exact moment where like he's like, this tells us everything we don't know about Lenore. It's like the best line in the book.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's pretty damn good.
Thank you. So yeah, that is like Cast of the Spell was like something I really loved, but I was always like, you know, we could do a little better with the representation here. And nobody screws a teenager. Like just adults, like 100% just consensual adults.
Oh no! I'm realizing right now all the zombies are black men. Damn it!
Yeah.
I didn't want to say anything.
I'm a little slow sometimes.
Because I was looking, I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the wait a minute moments.
This literally just occurred to me, and now I feel stupid. I still love the construction site scene. I don't care. Anyway.
it is fantastic. And the gargoyle. I love the gargoyle. And anyways, go on.
I just there's just so much that I adore about the writing of this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really all comes down to playing these things the way they would be if they were in your world. Yes. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of movies fuck that up. They're like, oh, the audience is going to love this. And they like play it up instead of just, if this was your world, you wouldn't fucking care. It would just be the way things are. Right. And for such a weird, hilarious comedic movie, they worked really hard to make sure everybody just treated all of this as normal. And that's so beautiful to me.
Right. And without being too self-referential about it.
Yeah.
Like, the zombies are just there. The monsters are just there. The gremlins can fuck your car up. It's just a fact of life. You don't need Will Smith to, beat a fairy to death. Like, literally.
I guess that brings us to movie recommendations, where we talk about things people should watch if they liked these movies. So, Zach, you're the guest. I will let you go first.
All right. Well, let me start with some Jewish recommendations, because there have been some good ones lately. I mentioned Blood Relative. I've mentioned a couple earlier. I would recommend Blood Relative, which is just a fantastically funny, fun movie with Noah Segan. It's basically his directorial effort, where he finds out he is a father who is a wandering Jewish vampire who now has to deal with being a father to a teenager. There's one called Attachment, which is a LGBT love story, which is also a dybbuks story about a Danish woman who's a washed-up actress who meets a Jewish woman in London. They fall for one another. She has a really overbearing mother, and it somehow manages to be heartwarming and funny and creepy, and it's just a really well-done movie. The others I recommend are The Offering, which is probably the darkest Jewish horror movie I've seen so far. It is set in a funeral, like an Orthodox funeral home that is being haunted by a demon that is trapped in one of the corpses. And it is just very well done. And if you like Cast a Deadly Spell, it's hard for me to think of like movies that are very much like it. I would say maybe like noir wise, I would recommend something like Nightmare Alley from Guillermo del Toro. Very
nice.
noir, very noir, very creepy. It is totally different, but it gives me the same vibes. But I just love the movie. Angel Heart with Mickey Rourke and Robert De Niro. It's like a noir horror film. It's really well done, very fucked up, very, 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 very good. And also I would maybe say Manhunter by Michael Mann, which is also a good noir horror film without any supernatural elements, but it is a very interesting throwback to what it's like the same kind of the adaptation of The Red Dragon before Silence of the Lambs was a thing.
Nice.
It's got Brian Cox as Hannibal Lecter, which is a fascinating portrayal.
It is, and I think it gets overshadowed for obvious reasons, but it's definitely good on its own too.
100%.
So I always do a double feature. I said at the beginning my double feature was these two films we talked about because that's how I watched them, and everyone should watch them in the order that I watched them as well. But I've changed my mind, and I'm going to do a double feature for both. I'm going to steal from Don, and I'm going to use Roger Rabbit because Roger Rabbit with Cast a Deadly Spell would be a fantastic fucking time. But if you're not into that, do Clue, do Death by Murder. Any of these together would be so much fun. And rent out a theater and let me be there because I want to go to this. As for the Vigil, that's harder for me because there's so many different things at play. But the one that came up to me is His House. And my reasoning is His House pulled from lore that we don't normally get. And it was so refreshing. It was so fucking good. And I think that plays really well with how we haven't gotten a lot of Jewish horror, and so we get this thing that feels so fresh in the Vigil. I think these two would work great together. You're up, Don.
And I hate you.
Oh, just for that. 87 films, Don.
It's like he picked Roger Rabbit and His House.
Well, you mentioned Roger Rabbit, so you really kicked that to me, but yeah.
Okay, Don, your top 100, go.
All right.
Yes, I like this guy.
All right, so we've got Get Out, Hush, It Follows, Sinister, we've got the Insidious series, Mandy, Hell House LLC, Barbarian, The Grudge, Veronica. I know I said the whole thing about Catholic stuff, so I just listed a couple that involve. And now there's the next one, Ouija, and then Ouija Origin of Evil. Both Catholic.
Ouija Origin of Evil was damn good, man.
It's so much better than the first one. Like it's
much better.
Oh, and that twist at the end was, it was great. And then
spoilers. Just kidding.
Well, it's a horror movie. What horror movie doesn't have a twist at the end? And of course, I mentioned Schindler's List earlier, and The Tigers Are Not Afraid.
Love that movie so much.
And then Roger Rabbit and His House.
Roger Rabbit and His House would be a fantastic movie. I would like to see that.
And I will tell everyone, go see Evil Dead Rise, because it rocks.
Nice. We will be dropping an episode on that very soon.
Fantastic. And if you like that one,
all right.
see his first one, The Hole in the Ground.
Oh, I definitely will.
I haven't even heard of that.
Oh, it's
I will
like
look this up.
It is a dark folk horror one from like basically, they're living in rural Ireland. It's a single mom and her son. There's like a large hole in the ground in the woods, and then something happens and she thinks like her son's not really her son anymore.
Beautiful.
It's great. But
nice.
Well, like I said, thank you guys so much. This was a blast.
Of course.
You can't leave yet. You have to tell people where they can find you on social and purchase your books for pre-order or whatever you want to do. I don't care.
Especially with all those books.
This is me. Let me just quickly.
You're in charge. Do anything.
Well, let me also quickly mention what else I have. Another I have coming up. I forgot to mention earlier. I have a Jewish pirate horror book coming out in November with Darklit Press, which I am super excited for, which I will describe as a mix between Black Sails meets Evil Dead meets The Vigil.
Ooh. And when does that come out again?
November. I've turned in the manuscript recently. We're doing some edits. Andrew at Darklit is freaking awesome. I'm going to let him do his thing.
I love Andrew.
He is amazing. He is just such a fantastic dude. Incredibly supportive, cares a lot about his authors, and we are just gonna I got him the manuscript, do my edits, let him do his thing. I'll let him decide when it's up for. I'll let everyone know when it's up for pre-order. You can find me. I'm working on a website now that will hopefully be up soon, but you can find me on social media at Twitter usually, as long as we can, at Zach Rose Writer. That is ZACHROSE Writer. I have a link tree that is posted there with links to all my stories you can find. And I also have my Amazon link for Hungers as Old as This Land is up. I am hoping everyone checks that out because I am having an absolute blast watching the reception. It is a book that Rio Ewers himself says was fucking awesome, man, in his, directly. And with Off Limits, we should be debuting the cover next week. And then I believe Off Limits is going to get that up on Amazon for pre-order pretty soon. So everyone, watch that. They know, if there's one thing I've learned with Off Limits, they know what they're doing with all the people they publish, like Laurel Hightower, Haley Piper, Tim McGregor. So I'm like, I've
never heard of any of these people.
Yeah, no, Haley's book is Even the Worm Will Turn is coming out tomorrow. That is the sequel to her hit The Worm and His King. So everyone be on the lookout for that too. But the shameless self-promotion over here, look for the Long Shalom in June, Hungers as Old as This Land in May 17th. And I've got a few things cooking right now. You can find, like I said, I have links to all my stories. One of my favorite ones called Savior in Steel is now up at the Dark Matter magazine jukebox. That the Deadlands will be up probably this fall, and I've got a few others coming soon. If you want to see my work involving Jewish monsters and Jewish people killing anti-Semites, then I think you'll enjoy The Golem's Joy and Seize the Press, which is coming out for free pretty soon. And what else do I have?
Look, not to cut you off, I love anything where anti-Semites, racists, homophobes, transphobes get their shit rocked.
You will very much like The Long Shalom and Hunger's As Old as This Land then.
All right.
Oh, yeah. You should definitely.
Oh, yeah.
You need more Zach in your life. That's what I'm saying.
Well, if all
now, legitimately, your book, The Long Shalom, is my favorite thing I've read this year so far. And I'm not saying that to blow smoke in any way, because people who listen to the show know that I usually just complain about everything. So
he does.
So really, man, keep it up. I know you're already on fire and you're selling stuff everywhere, and I'm so excited to watch where you go from here, man.
Thank you so much, man. The Long Shalom is one of the books of my heart. Originally, funny title. I was originally thinking of calling it Spirits and Speakeasies, and I just had the idea of The Long Shalom. And my friends were like, no, you are not allowed to change that title.
Yeah, it's good. And it works so well with the opening line, as you already said. So yeah, it's beautiful, man. It's
Thank you. Yes, it is just, I did a lot of research on history and folklore, and the way I described it is let's take, Cast a Deadly Spell and the Vigil and mix it up with, put that over Raylan Chandler and mix it up with some Laird Barron and P. Jelly Clark's Ring Shout, and this is what we got.
Glorious. Well, cool. Thank you so much for coming today, man.
Thank you guys for having me.
Oh,
I love these films so much. So yeah.
I'm so glad.
All right. I guess that wraps it up for another week. As always, I'm James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
So you claim. And we will see you here next week here at thenecronama.com.
What is that dark, shadowy thing outside?